Hello and welcome to the World Handicap System Club presentation conducted by Golf Ontario and the Handicap and Course Rating Department. Prior to 2020, we had six systems around the world calculating the worlds of handicapping, all trying to achieve the same goal of measuring the golfer's potential ability under an equitable play. But we know that with different formulas and different ways of rating courses that it caused a lot of complications for all golfers around the world. And now in 2020, it felt like the right time to launch the World Handicap System. In the governance side of golf, we had one set of rules for amateur status, one set of rules for equipment standards, and last year we had the rollout of the rules of golf. And now in 2020, we have one set of rules for the World Handicap System, making the world of golf all on equal playing grounds. As you can see in this map, this was what the world of handicapping looked like with the six systems covering all parts of the world. And in 2020, this is what the World Handicap System will be doing to cover handicapping around the world. When you receive a copy of the Rules of Handicapping book, you will see that it is now simplified to 7 rules of handicapping, covering everything from before the round, during the round, and after the round. You'll notice that the template is very similar to the rules of golf in terms of format, using simple language, plain language. You also see that there are principle statements at the beginning of each rule giving an outline of what the rule is entailed. And at the end of the 7 rules, there's also appendices in place to help provide some additional support and guidance for the golfer or the handicap committee. All these terminologies for us here in Canada we are very familiar with course rating, slope rating, scratch player, and bogey player. Handicap index we previously called handicap factor. The reason why we now call it handicap index is because everyone around the world has been calling handicap index, and with everyone coming together, handicap index was the terminology now used to illustrate the demonstrated ability for a golfer under the standard playing difficulties. Course and slope rating we're very familiar with here in North America. Course rating calculates a golfer under a scratch golfer under normal conditions, and slope rating calculates a golfer's ability for a bogey player. Scratch player is just someone with a 0.0 handicap index, and bogey player has a handicap index of 20.0 for men and 24.0 for women. One of the big changes to calculating of the handicap index is we now take the average of the best 8 scores of your last 20 scores. In the old Golf Canada handicap system, we use the average of the best 10 scores of your last 20 scores. So now it's now we take 2 of your bad scores out the window. Getting a handicap index has now been more easier and more inclusive and accessible. We now just need 54 holes made up of a combination of 9 and 18 holes to establish an initial handicap index. There's no timeline in terms of when each score needs to be posted, but we highly recommend that golfers post their initial scores hole by hole to understand a true potential ability of the golfer. One of the big changes is the maximum handicap index is now 54.0. Under the previous system, the Golf Canada system, the men had a maximum handicap of 36.4 and women of 40.4. The reason why the World Handicap Committee believed 54.0 was the maximum handicap index is because they wanted to make the game more inclusive and accessible for golfers starting the game and getting a handicap index of all age and gender. Net double bogey replaces the previous equitable stroke control table in calculating the maximum hole score for handicap purposes. And so we'll go through an example of how we calculate net double bogey. So in order to calculate net double bogey, we take the par of the hole that the golfer is playing, plus 2, and any plus or minus handicap stroke holes received on a given hole. So let's go through an example. So we have a golfer here that has a course handicap of 11. That means he receives 11 strokes on the first 11 holes that are allocated for handicap stroke holes. The golfer plays a par 4 with a stroke index of 6. What is his net double bogey? His net double bogey would be par of the hole, which is 4, plus 2, and plus 1, the handicap stroke hole he receives, to get a maximum hole score of 7. So if the golfer scores an 11, for handicap purposes, his maximum score will be 7. The good news is that the Golf Canada Score Center system will automatically calculate your net double bogey if you post your scores hole by hole. So that takes a step away from the golfer in terms of spending time calculating net double bogey out on the golf course. So we have another example here. We have a golfer that is a course handicap of 18. She completes the 17th hole with a score of 8, but because of net double bogey, it's now adjusted to a 7. So for competition and tournament purposes, she would record a 95, but for handicap purposes, she would record a 94. The playing conditions calculation is a key feature that we here in Canada feel like we've gained in our system. What the playing conditions calculation does is adjust score differential based on weather and course setup. The good news is golf courses, superintendents, staff members don't have to input weather or wind every day to evaluate any kind of playing conditions calculation adjustments. This is all done behind the scenes on Golf Canada Score Center. So let's take a look at how it works. The playing conditions calculation is performed once a day, so that's why it's important to post your score before midnight, because the evaluations happens during midnight. It will consider all acceptable scores, whether it's competitive round, recreational round, 9-hole or 18-hole, as long as they're acceptable under the rules of handicapping, those scores will be accepted for the PCC evaluation. All it needs on the golf course is 8 acceptable scores for players under handicap index of 36.0. The reason why it's 36.0 is because we know that golfer above 36.0, their scores are continuing to fluctuate as they post more scores, so that's why the World Handicap Committee felt 36.0 was a benchmark when we come to evaluating a playing conditions calculation. The good news again, the golfers, all they have to do is post their score, and a mathematical calculation of statistical analysis will be completed behind the scenes at Golf Canada Score Center. So it doesn't matter if the course was played easy that day or harder, or whether it was a weather factor that impacted the course. We just know that there's scores outside the expected score to trigger the adjustment. And again, what I mean by expected score is scores that are within the course and slope rating, because we know that course and slope rating is rated under mid-season conditions. So whenever there are scores outside the expected scores, that will trigger an adjustment. And the adjustment range will range from -1 to 3, meaning -1 making the course easier and +3 making the course harder. Daily revision is something that here in Canada we feel like we are a leader in. In our previous system, every time a golfer posts a score, your handicap index automatically updates. So now that the playing conditions calculation is also heavily factored in, we definitely encourage golfers after their round to post their score before midnight so that if there's any kind of adjustments in place, that they could be part of those evaluations. One of the questions that we get a lot with the playing conditions calculation is, for example, let's say we play on a Monday and there was a PCC adjustment that took place, and player A posted a score and his score was part of the evaluation, but player B missed an opportunity to post on that Monday and he decides to post on a Friday. So even though the golfer posted on a Friday, player B will still get an adjustment for PCC if there was a PCC adjustment on that day. The exceptional score replaces our previous tournament score that was in the Golf Canada handicap system. In the new exceptional score, any golfer that posts a score which their score differential is at least 7 strokes better than their handicap index at time, it will trigger an extra adjustments for their handicap index. So it can be scores from a competitive round or a casual round or a general round. Any scores like that, that adjustment will kick in. The good news again is the Golf Canada Score Center takes care of the adjustments behind the scenes for you, and it'll reflect on all of your previous records based on your adjustment. However, do keep in mind that the handicap committee can override those adjustments if there is any kind of issues. The next topic we're going to talk about is some safeguards and some cap mechanism in place for low handicap index as well as any kind of hard and soft cap. The low handicap index, of course, is achieved during a 12-month period of time, so 365 days preceding to the most recent score on their scoring record. And as we go into the capping system, you'll learn that it's a very modernized term for us here to limit the amount of upward movement the golfer may have. So let's dive into the low handicap index. So a low handicap index is retaining a memory of your last 365 days of scoring record. It's a reference point to compare to your handicap index. So I look at it like it as an anchor to look at how the golfer has been able to perform throughout his 365 days, knowing that he previously during that time period was able to perform. It also ensures that the player's current handicap index is not stray too far from what their demonstrated ability, and that in a short period of time that it doesn't move in a very dramatic manner. And that if the new index is more than a certain number, there's various caps that triggers, and we'll talk about this in the next slide. So the soft cap can be suppressive of the upward movement when there's difference between the newly calculated index and the low handicap index is greater than 3, and that the increase is suppressed by 50% of any value over 3. The hard cap is a hard ceiling. It comes into play when the amount of upward movement is 5 above the low handicap index. The only way the soft and hard cap will take place is if the golfer has at least 20 scores in his or her accounts. So let's take a look at an example. So here we have a golfer with a low handicap index of 20.0. So from June to March, his handicap can move from 20 to 23 without any restriction. However, as you can see on this graph, the golfer's handicap continues to increase from February to May between 23 and 25. That's when the 50% adjustment comes into play to slow the amount of upward movement the golfer may have. So let's say the golfer continues to trend upwards here and it gets to 24.0. It'll be 50% and it'll drop back to 23.5. And that once they get to 25.0, they'll reach their hard cap and they can no longer increase their handicap within the 365-day rolling period. And the handicap committee can override any of this in any situation based on the golfer's handicap review. Again, the good news is the Golf Canada Score Center takes care of any kind of soft cap and hard cap in place. And for us here in Canada, we feel like it's a big boost for our system just because we know as golfers, when our active season starts on April 15th, a lot of us are dusting off the rust off our game and we could see a little bit of upward tick in our handicap, but we know that with this new key feature that the soft and hard cap are in place to limit the amount of upward movement the golfer can have during a 365-day rolling period. So transitioning to the amount of holes needed to be able to complete a 9 or 18 hole round. For 18 hole round, the golfer needs to at least complete 14 holes in order for it to be an acceptable round for handicap purposes. And for a 9-hole round, the golfer needs to complete at least 7 holes in the order for that to be an acceptable round. One of the situations that a lot of golfers face is unplayed holes and most likely scores. We have a lot of situations where it gets dark late and we can't finish those holes, and we will have to put scores in for handicap purposes. Under the new world handicap system, net par would be the solution to unplayed holes for darkness, lightning, or parents picking up their kids. So in order to calculate your net par, all you have to do is take the par of the hole plus any kind of strokes applied to the golfers um, on the scorecard. We also know that golfers sometimes start a hole and do not complete their hole for various reasons, also because of darkness or maybe because of injury. And the rules of handicapping has tools in place to calculate what we call most likely scores. So as you see on the right side here, there's a diagram in the rules of handicapping book illustrating what the most likely score would be if a golfer is at a various distance. So if the golfer is no more than 5 feet, you would just add 1 stroke. If the golfer is between 5 to 20 yards, you would add 2 to 3 strokes depending on the golfer's ability, the difficulty of the green, and where the ball is positioned. And that if it's more than 20 yards, you would add potentially 3 to 4 strokes depending on the position of the ball, the golfer's ability, and the difficulty of the green. So this is how we calculate unplayed holes and most likely score if those situations do come up. Unfortunately, on the Golf Canada score center system, we can't put any X or zeros in place, so golfers will need to calculate net par and most likely score to input for handicap purposes on Golf Canada score center. So next we're going to talk about course handicap. How I like to explain the difference between handicap index and course handicap is the following. Your handicap index is like your passport, it travels around the world, it's who you are as a golfer. Your course handicap is like your visa. Depending on which country you go to or which course you go to and which tees you play, that's the course handicap that the golfer will be given. The one change in the course handicap is it now includes course rating minus par to truly reflect what the course handicap is for the golfer. As you can see in this poster we created, in 2019 the course handicap was calculated as handicap index multiplied by your slope rating divided by the standard slope of 113. In 2020 we now add the course rating minus par to calculate the course handicap. So let's look at a quick example. In this example, we have a golfer of 15.0 handicap index, and you can see the difference between the green tees and the silver tee is 4.0 in course rating. It's a standard par of 70, so back in 2019 without the course rating minus par, the calculation was 17 and 17 and 16 for the course handicap, which was just a 1-stroke difference between the green tee and silver tee. But now with the World Handicap System, the back tee will now give the golfer a 19 in course handicap and a 14 for the front tee for the silver tee at 14. So we can see that that's a 5-stroke difference in course handicap. And why is that good for handicapping? It's because par is something that we are very familiar with, and we know that golfers competing with different tees will now not need any adjustments. Previously, we would have to do the 3-5 adjustments under the Golf Canada system, but now because the course rating minus par is part of the formula, we no longer need to do any adjustments for course handicap. So as you can see on the screen, we have a course in BC that has different pars, and you can see how that affects the course handicap based on the various pars the golfer will see on the different tees that they're playing. And as you can see here, we have a course here in Ontario with the par consistent from the back tee to the front tee, showing what the course handicap is for the golfer. The new target score is also a new formula, and now it's par of the holes plus the course handicap to get what the golfer should be shooting under their course handicap. The playing handicap is something that is a new term for us here in Canada, and it talks about how the number of strokes is given for the specific format of play. So in order to calculate your course handicap, all you would have to do is use your course handicap and multiply the handicap allowance applicable for the golfer. And as you can see here, we have a chart in the appendix illustrating the various formats of play available for specific competitions or member guest events that are in place. So do check that out in the appendix in the Rules of Handicapping book, illustrating the recommended handicap allowances. So what did we talk about today? In the new World Handicap System, we now use the best 8 of the last 20 scores. We know that we have course handicap and playing handicap for the various formats of play, as well as the various formats of tees we play. We have cap mechanisms in place to restrict the amount of upward movement the golfer may have, and it's all calculated behind the scenes on Golf Canada Score Center, as long as you have 20 scores. We also have the playing conditions calculation, which is in place to adjust for any kind of weather or course setup behind the scenes on Golf Canada Score Center system. We have exceptional scores to give golfers the bonus they deserve for playing exceptional rounds. And all the golfer needs to do is post their score, and those will be adjusted on the Golf Canada Score Center system. And that net double bogey replaces the old equitable stroke control table for maximum hole scores for handicap purposes. Here we have a screenshot of what Golf Canada Score Center looks like under the New World Handicap system. On the left side, you can see there was a PCC adjustment that took place for this golfer's account. So a little hat symbol is denoted next to the score differential. And when the golfer clicks on that score differential, the bottom screen will show up explaining where the PCC adjustment took place. On the right side, you'll see what golfers will see when they pull up their handicap scoring record. You can see very clearly that the low handicap index is now available under the golfer's handicap index once they have 20 scores, and that there's also an adjustment column in place if there's any kind of exceptional score, PCC adjustment that needs to be inputted, or any kind of handicap adjustment completed by the committee.
What will the World Handicap System mean for you, the player? It all starts with a measure of your golfing ability, calculated the same way for every player around the world. A handicap index that you can take with you anywhere and use at whatever course you're playing. Before your round, decide which tees you're going to play from, which can be different for each member of your group. Every set of tees will have a course and slope rating based on course difficulty. These will normally be available on a lookup chart near the first tee or through an app. Next, decide the format of play. This will determine the handicap allowance you will be given. Together, the course rating, slope rating, and handicap allowance convert your handicap index into a playing handicap, representing the number of strokes you receive for the round, providing you the best opportunity of doing well, whoever you're playing. Some formats of play aren't suitable for submitting a score for handicap purposes. If you're playing a round and would like to submit your score, you may need to check the procedures before you play. If you're ever in doubt about the rules and procedures relating to handicapping, check with the club where you're playing. During the round itself, go out and play, enjoying the game as you always would. Knowing how many strokes you receive for the round also lets you know the maximum number of strokes that you'll receive on each hole. While one bad hole might mean you don't win the competition, you can still submit an acceptable score for handicap purposes. If the format of play allows, you should pick up when you reach your maximum hole score, keeping your game and the game of everyone else on the course moving along. At the end of your round, add up your score, including any penalty strokes and any applicable adjustments for holes not played or where you didn't hole out. When your score is ready, make sure it's verified as required, then simply submit your score in accordance with club policy. By submitting your score as soon as possible, you ensure all necessary calculations, adjustments and safeguards can be applied, giving you an accurate, up-to-date handicap index ready for the next day or soon after. The more scores you submit, the more accurately your handicap index will reflect your ability. Up-to-date, easy to understand and adaptable. The World Handicap System lets you play the way you always have, as well as giving you a handicap index that will travel anywhere you decide to play.
If you have any questions, please contact our handicap and course rating department, and we're more than happy to assist you. Thank you for watching the World Handicap System Club presentation, and have a good day.